record now? Okay, we're recording. Hi to everybody who couldn't make it. All right, Maria, take it away.
All right, so let's go ahead and we'll talk about our agreements. I'm going to share the screen and go back to the whiteboard. All right, so on the whiteboard with our agreements, let's see, I'm gonna go to text. This is just what we agreed to that would make our meeting the best it can be. So we've all been doing these online meetings, or more of these online meetings than we used to before COVID. What are the kind of things that really make this the best kind of meeting for you and make it easier for you to concentrate and easier for you to have a good conversation? So like one of the first things I think of is if you have, I know at my house, almost all my work meetings tend to be around the same time that they mow my lawn. So I mute when I know that there's a lot of background noise. So that's one of the agreements I tend to go with. Is there anything else that makes meeting easier for you?
Try not to take phone calls or be distracted.
Definitely. Along with that, because we know this is a big part of your day, Jennifer and I are very much aware of the time, and we want to finish on time for you. So this class will end on time.
I would think maybe turn your video off if you do need to step away, or if you're having a side conversation somehow with a coworker.
Definitely. It sometimes is hard to stare at the chair.
So one thing I'd like to say is that these tend to be more fulfilling and energizing for everyone if we get full participation. So I would like to see everybody participate.
All right, any last minute ideas?
Pretty well.
Okay. So if everyone can agree to these agreements, go ahead either in, you can give a thumbs up visually or a thumbs up in nice. All right. I'm going to go ahead and save this so we have it for in 2 weeks. And stop share. All right. I'll give the floor back over to you, Jennifer.
Okay. So before we go into connected learning, I wanted to sort of outline the larger picture for this training and for also the computational thinking training that we do. So this is part of a larger national grant that a couple of different associations got. So YALSA, which is the Young Adult Library Services Association, and then COSLA, which is basically the state libraries all have an association too. So they got together because there's this real need for teen services training across the board. And then when you're doing something nationally, there's not going to be like a lot of details in terms of programs, because everybody sort of has a different setup. Just even within the state libraries, everybody functions differently. So this course isn't going to be a lot of like how to actually do teen services in your library. What we hope is that by the end of it, you have the skills and the knowledge to create really robust teen services for your library, but it's not going to be like you do this particular program and all the teens will flock to your library. So just setting expectations. We're really focusing more on theory and knowledge so that when you go to implement things, you'll have that background that you need to make some really quality programs that are relevant for your community. The way we've set it up this month is that we have a 4-week Canvas course. Hopefully all of you have been able to get into Canvas, and I think I've seen you on the discussion boards. So every Friday, I will actually release the next week's Canvas content to you, probably Friday mornings. So you'll have a few days to work on it. On Mondays, you'll get an email from me talking about what we're doing that week. And then on Wednesdays, you'll get a second email from me. I actually wrote those emails a couple weeks ago, and they're just set to auto send. So that's just, they're just going to come to you whether you like it or not. So that's how they work. And then we'll do the 2 Zoom meetings. And what we really want to focus on in these meetings is a chance for you to collaborate, to sort of hash out what you thought about the content of the courses. We'll lead you through some guided discussions and through some activities, but really it's time for you to share with each other, because what makes these courses so successful is when you are all learning from each other. And if we were able to be here in person, we'd have a bigger group and we'd all be able to contribute. And it can be really cool, but so we're trying to recreate that as much as we can on Zoom, while also trying to be respectful of the fact that all of your libraries are functioning during a pandemic. Time is short, energy is short. So we're going to keep these to 2 1-hour sessions. So this is the first one. And the assignments are for your own benefit. No one is grading them. I do sort of mark down on a spreadsheet who finished what though, so I can keep track of that for my records. And then if you do most of this stuff, we're going to give you a certificate at the end. But really what you're going to get out of this is the ability to really create teen services that are relevant and meaningful for the folks in your community. So, but it really is up to you to what you will get out of it, what you put into it. So does anybody have any questions about the class or how it functions, how we're going to work? Okay, well then let's go on and actually talk about connected learning, or as we like to call it, level up teen learning. Connected learning is the framework that we'll discuss, but you know, why not make it a fun title? So that's what we did, level up.
All right, so connected learning. This is one of my favorite trainings that we did, because the more I learned about it, the more I learned about how relationships and interests and opportunities combine together, the more I thought of one person in particular. Not as much, she is not one of my library patrons. She's actually my niece. So I am going to go ahead and share with you her picture, just so you have kind of a visual to see this person as I talk about her. So this is my Xana, Xana, short for Alexandra. She is one of those kids who's an absolute Harry Potter fiend, loves books, loves everything to do with John Green and pop culture in that kind of aspect, nerd fighter. So her mom is an English professor. She has an aunt for a librarian aunt. And as you can imagine, she had a lot of books introduced to her from the time she was born. So Xana, from the time she was really little, started to show an interest in writing. She saw her older sister writing stories and then sharing it with her mom and sharing it with her dad and sharing it with her aunt, me. And so Xana thought that this was the best way to be able to showcase her skills. And her stories started out like little one-liners at the bottom of pictures that she drew, and eventually kept growing bigger and bigger until she was writing chapters. Well, one of her friends decided that they thought it was really cool what she was doing, and they had found Wattpad. So with Wattpad, Xana was able to start writing for an audience that wasn't just her school teachers, her parents, and her aunt. She started to publish different stories, found out that her favorite thing to write was dialogue, And so she wrote scripts detailing experiences in her life from a middle schooler perspective. So everyone in her class, which she has a small class of like 30, 40 kids, I think, were involved in this story. And she changed experiences and made them into almost fantasy-like elements. Her classmates were able to connect with her through Wattpad and loved when they figured out which character they were, because she would change the names. And as she kept doing Wattpad, she would also have these friends and other people she connected with on Wattpad ask her to read their stories. Her story at one time was one of the top 100 stories that was being read on Wattpad. So she got a lot of interest from other people who'd wanted to see her story, her read their story. And she had people who would ask if they could illustrate her cover and things like that. Well, this summer, because of all that she had been doing on Wattpad, Wattpad actually started an institute, a class, that they invited certain participants to come to special sessions where they introduced them to publishers and they introduced them to authors. And she was able to get even more help with her writing and had advice from some of the top writers in Wattpad and other places. So her writing, that started out as an interest through her relationships and with her family and her friends, gained into an opportunity where she could write on Wattpad and actually have people talk about her work, to an opportunity where she actually got to meet people who write books for a living and people who are paid to help writers get their books out. So it's been a great opportunity for her and she loves telling me all about it. So when I think about connected learning, I kept thinking about her and all the opportunities she had, starting with relationships and interests combining together. But then as those combined, getting more and more opportunities to be able to build on her interests and build her relationships to a worldwide audience. So as you were learning more and more about connected learning, what stood out to you about your teenage years when you were thinking back? Oh, sorry, wrong question. Sorry, put that one on hold. That one, I was reading the wrong section. When you think about relationships, interests, and opportunities, what one of those categories really stands out to you? And which one of those categories seems the most important to you?
I would say probably relationships, because I think most everything starts with a relationship. It's like you can't even find out what somebody's interests are or what opportunities there might be unless you have a relationship with that person.
Very true. Yeah, honestly, whenever I think of connected learning, it always seems to come first with the relationship, and then you know the interest, and then you can find an opportunity. Definitely. Anyone else have any comment about that? All right, Bridget, you said it all. So awesome. All right, so my next question would be, how would you describe connected learning to your coworker? So you have all these coworkers who are like, you're taking this online class and it says connected learning. What does that even mean? And how does that even help you or the library?
I guess for me, it would be to, if I do program and I have these kids that come pretty much every week to the program, and I have some that only come for specific programs. So like, for example, I know these boys only show up for the virtual reality, right? So how can I make this more than just go and play a virtual reality game at the library? How can I tie that into maybe interests that, you know, maybe they want to host the virtual reality program. Maybe they want to at some point become virtual reality programmers. Is that something they'd be interested in? What people might be able to help them with that?
Definitely.
So,
Or even with those groups, it always makes me wonder, like, especially with like Dungeons and Dragons, do any of them ever want to become a dungeon master themselves? Because that's a huge step. Do they ever, are they interested in helping another person develop a character?
yeah, I mean, we had one kid that used to come, and then he was kind of the older teenage range, and so we during the summer had a drop in VR where we didn't want to have a staff person there for the entire day, just supervising kids playing VR, right? It's like some are reading up other things to do. Anyway, so we asked him, hey, would you be willing to come in and host this program for us? And he was like, yeah, and he did a great job. And now he's off to college, actually doing something game related. So
Very cool. I love it. He got an opportunity because you already had that relationship built and knew his interest. Very cool.
I think for the setting in our library, we don't really see teens like almost at all, and which is kind of funny because we're across the street from the high school.
oh gosh.
But they just don't come in. I mean, they don't even check out our books, which we have a fantastic collection. So I think if I was going to talk to my coworkers about like, why am I taking this class and why is it so important when we don't even have teenagers coming into the library in the first place, would probably be, well, I need to find a way to connect with them and find what their interests are, because apparently my interests, I guess, are not theirs. So I need to figure out a way to connect with them and with figure out like who they already have relationships with, maybe what kind of in our community who they have relationships with, where I can maybe glean information, because they're not giving it to me. So I need to find somebody else who can act as a bridge, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, and right now it's just like, I'm like, wow, who knows if I have a teen program when we actually have programs again, you know, because I had a pretty good group together, and now it's been like 6 months where nobody's seen each other, and it's just such a weird world right now, but it feels like, yeah, who knows? I mean, it seems like every year you kind of have to rebuild from scratch, because the kids that were there the year before over the summer, they kind of wander off and find different interests and go to different schools, if they get jobs, and then you back to square one in September.
Yeah, I keep telling my coworkers, well, maybe the kids who started as babies with me in baby time, you know, like I've seen them kind of, you know, age up, you know, over the last couple of years. And I keep thinking like, well, maybe they'll be my teens. Maybe the kids who started with me as babies, but that's a long time to wait.
You do have relationships with them.
Right.
That's one part. Melanie, did you want to say something?
Well, no, I'm taking everything in from everybody because I agree the same. But yeah, no, there was a comment said last week in the course that I went back and told my coworker, and I said, well, what I feel like this is going to emphasize to us is hopefully some ways to entice the kids to come in. And so be it I get some activity going and it ends, but it ends with kind of like a cliffhanger somehow to bring them back the next week, or the next time, is what I'm aiming for, just to see, and then hope that they tell others. We've never had anything that I've known of, and being that I'm a year and a half into it, I'm still trying to learn everything about the place, let alone taking on a program. But if they could give me their help and direction, and then, like I said, something that entices them to come back every week, is what I'm aiming for. So that's what I explained to my coworker I hope to get out of this.
Awesome. I love it because honestly, yeah, just listening to the discussions you guys have with each other as you're like, okay, so how do we talk to these teens? How do we get them to come in? How do we build the relationship to understand their interests? That's going to be, the conversations between all of you are going to be a huge part of the class.
So one of the things we were going to talk about next is examples from your library of when you've seen connected learning in action. I thank you, Bridget, for sharing yours, but it sounds like Melanie and Stacy are here because they need to get those. So I'm going to
I
share
need to
just,
get the ideas.
yeah. You know, when we did this class last month, we had um, a few different stories that were really interesting. We had um, someone who had a teen come in pretty regularly in their very like rural agricultural based area, and that librarian was thinking about how they could connect them with other agricultural businesses to get them some interesting experiences. We had someone who had a teen who was really into 3D printing, and so she was trying to figure out a way to connect that teen with outlets for using that knowledge about 3D printing to benefit other areas in their community. So there's lots of different ways you can help the teens connect. But I think the focus is really on what are their interests, but then those opportunities and relationships are something that you can facilitate. I went to a really cool presentation at the Public Library Association conference in February, right before when we could travel, so right before travel was cut off. And a really fun example of connected learning from from a panel that I went to was actually tweens. So when we talk about teens, we're kind of bringing in those tweens too. So we're also talking about those 11, 12-year-olds as well. And the younger they are, the more likely you can get them in your building and keep them because they can't drive yet. Uh, so in this case, they had some sixth grade boys, and the library had this program where they took the after school kids to different businesses to kind of give them an idea of what the businesses did. So like career exposure. And in this case, I think the business was like insurance or something where the men at the office dressed up and wore suits and ties. And so during a break, a couple of the boys were asking one of the gentlemen about his tie. And he took off his tie and showed the kids how to tie it. And the kids practiced, and they learned how to tie their own ties or tie a tie. And it was really impactful for them. A few of these boys didn't have fathers who were at home or regularly in their lives, and this was something that was really meaningful to them. So they went back and practiced. They got their own ties to tie. They practiced tying ties. They all wore ties to their sixth grade for a couple of weeks. One little boy would keep his tied and just loosen it and like take it off every day and then put it back on so he didn't have to tie it again. But it had, that one experience that the library facilitated was so meaningful to him because it exposed him to something he didn't really know about. It taught him a skill, but it let him envision himself um, and in a future that he hadn't even thought of. And when you think about what you do with library services, giving people that access to even experiences where they can push themselves to be more than they thought they could is really at the heart of it. So as you're thinking about how you're going to implement connected learning in your library, I would say think about who your community partners are already, who you can leverage to bring in for an experience. Maybe your library isn't set up to do field trips offsite to other places, but if you can do it, or if you can have those folks come into your library, it can be really worthwhile. I will also tell you about a time when I tried to do a teen program that was all about maintaining your own car, because I wanted to get all those kids who got their first cars and then I never saw again. I wanted to like bring them back in and be like, don't you want to know how to change your own oil and check your washer fluid? And no, no. They did not come to that. It was a dud. I had 0 people come, and I had 2 really great mechanics there just to show them how to do everything. So didn't always work, but I didn't have a teen who was specifically interested in it. That was more me thinking they should be interested in this. So that was sort of my lesson there.
I was actually so watching some of your videos. One of the things that stood out to me was, Stacy, we were talking about true crime. So my first job as a teen librarian, I had these group of teens that they were on a teen advisory board from before, the previous librarian before me. And we had like 3 kids that showed up all the time. And the only thing they would tell me pretty much is they wanted food. Whatever it was, they wanted food. And if it could be a video game, it even better. And I find them as just like, what if we, instead of doing video game nights, why don't we do a murder mystery? And they looked at me and were like, what is that? So I taught them, I was like, oh, a murder mystery, where you get clues and you try to figure out who did the murder. And they were like, and you eat food? I'm like, yeah, I would do a full thing of food if you would do a murder mystery with me. And so we had like a full dinner after the library closed. And I had bought like a $20 murder mystery kit and brought in some food. And the kids loved it. Some of them, it was probably one of the only times they actually read outside of school. And they really got into it so much that they kept asking me, okay, so how many murder mysteries can we do? Can we do one every month? I'm like, I can't afford one every month, but I could do one every quarter. And they're like, okay, we got this every quarter. But some of these kids who really didn't like reading that much suddenly picked up on reading if they could read true crime or if they could read murder mysteries. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, totally go for this. And then after a couple of years of doing these, a couple of the kids got together and like, you always know the answer. I'm like, well, I have to read through it and make sure it works. They're like, no, next time you're not going to know the answer and we are. I'm like, okay, I'm listening. How's this going to work? They wrote a murder mystery dinner for me.
Oh, cool.
And created characters, and they got like 10 of them together because they kept building themselves as we kept doing these, and got 10 of them together, and they each wrote their own characters' lines. A couple of them knew who was going to be the murderer at the end. And they worked it out with my coworkers to edit and make sure it was library appropriate, and just told me what food to bring. So they wrote this great murder mystery. And yeah, they were totally into, okay, well, maybe we could sell this. Maybe we could become murder mystery writers and things like that. But really the best part was, I was like, wow, these kids who didn't read are now like reading all these books and are writing because they want to, which I thought was so fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have that group of 3 already. So as far as like getting them in, I don't know. I wonder if you have like a true crime group at your high school or middle school, because it is a big interest and one that not everyone knows about right off.
Yeah, that's fun. I'm gonna have to look into that. I'm sure you can do a virtual one too. So I mean, I know there's like, escape rooms and things like that. So there's got to be a virtual, murder mystery date.
There's got to be something.
Yeah.
Well, I like what you said earlier, Stacy, about trying to figure out what relationships the kids in your community already have, because I feel like that's a really key point if you aren't seeing the teens in your library, is doing some sort of community asset map for teens, to figure out where they are, what resources do they have available to them. It'll really help you figure out what the gaps are too and what they need. I'm not saying do a whole community asset map because that's a lot of resources to put into something, but you can do like a little scan of what's out there. In fact, you might even ask a teen who needs some volunteer hours at your high school, hey, can you find this information out? Just put them to work, but also make it work for you.
Right.
Well, we're moving locations out here in New Plymouth. and we're acquiring the building on October 1st, and then I get to go through the whole process of a remodel. But our library is going to be 4 times the size it's been
Nice.
for like 40 years. And so I'm just super excited. I feel like if if we have a big open house, and then I have one of these nights already planned for the kids. But again, this is probably like 6 months down the road, but there's hope in the future for me. So I like these ideas, and when I get the bigger place, hopefully I can entice them in there. So
That's amazing, Melanie. I don't think that was on my radar. That's so cool.
well, it's just recently happened, and we had to kind of keep it on the down and low until it was official. So they gave us the thumbs up. We can let the public know. So I'm trying to get everybody excited.
That's great.
Yeah.
I have a thought on that. I like to listen a lot and hear people's responses. This is Kathy, by the way. I think it's great that your library is growing, and I'm, new to the community library network, and obviously COVID is a hindrance, if you would, to, personal networking in a lot of ways, and getting community people involved, because, places are still not allowed to do some of that. But I do try to interact with the teens that are coming in and let them know I'm there, and just kind of chat with them. I think the whole thing that was pointed out at the beginning, the relationship factor, is paramount in that you're open and willing to communicate with them, for one, that you're willing to listen, and then maybe you can find out some of their interests, and get a conversation. Hey, what kind of programs would you attend here, and do you have friends that could come? And you just really have to kind of broaden everything out, and be like a fan, where you just open up and try and suck it all in, and see if there's things that they suggest that you can work in. The murder mystery, the bringing in community speakers to do things. And again, because of COVID, that's a little frustrating right now. And trying to do those on live programs, they're successful, maybe not. So, just super cool ideas. And I think it's great. Everybody's working on these, and they will come to fruition as things change in our world. So anyway, enough.
Thanks, Kathy. And even if you have to wait until those little babies grow up, sometimes it's just a time investment. All right, Maria, shall we talk about our personal reflections?
Woohoo, yes. So I was having so much fun watching the videos. It was a lot of fun to get to know all of you, and honestly, wow, you guys had a lot of maker experiences, and a lot of experiences with reading, and a lot of experiences. Okay, Stacy, I enjoyed your experiences with gossip, definitely. It was fun to get to know you that way, and to hear about all the cool things that you remembered about growing up. So one of the things that really stood out to me when I did my self-reflection, I hadn't realized how much of an important role these adults had had in my life. They kind of just were there. And then when I thought back on them, I was like, oh, yeah, they really helped identify me in this situation. And same with the peers that I worked with. So as you were doing this video, as you were thinking back on your past and your experiences growing up, what stood out to you about your teenage years?
Oh, I guess I can go first. I I kind of put in there, I was very much a loner. I was very shy. I'm told nowadays that can't be true. I would go and hide all the time. I didn't put that in my video because there's a couple things that came up after the fact, but super, super shy. I only had like 4 friends, and when they didn't show up to school, I was devastated because I went to Capitol there in Boise. So there's like, 1,600 kids there. Well, back in the day, that was a long time ago. I'm sure it's bigger now, but I still had good reflections. I read a lot. I had good relationships with my parents for the most part, even though I was a little snarky. I'm certainly glad though, even though that I wasn't the best teenager. And so I was glad when I didn't get a girl of my own, because I did not want to be dealing with a teenage girl and raising her, because I wasn't always the kindest. And then when I was quiet, I got away with a lot. My brother calls me, my little sister is an only child. So he reports that a lot. But I had good memories and good times of different things that happened. I read a lot, always thought of being a librarian. Now I am. I taught exercise, or went to exercise classes, because I wasn't really in sports. Then that escalated into me teaching and getting myself through college by that way, by teaching aerobic and step classes. So I kind of mentioned that in my video. My grandma was huge because my mom did not bake. She cleaned, and she hoped that she taught me that, but she didn't really, because I'm not a good cleaner. But I do like to bake, and when I do, I remember my grandma. But I've gotten myself so busy now, I just pass it on to my son, which I think is fun. So that's kind of the things I remember from high school, and then it still just reflects and brought up good memories the other day when I was recording that.
So
That's definitely- Oh, sorry, Jennifer, go.
So Melanie, I grew up in Boise too. I went to Bora, go Lions.
Oh, okay.
But I loved when you talked about going to, I know. I love when you talked about going to the town square library, because I went to that library a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And it brought back good memories for me too. So
because I would definitely sneak in trying to go shopping too, but when we'd head out that back door, that was just a quaint little library, and if it was open, I was like, I need a book, Mom. So so that they enjoyed that, but that's fun.
Yeah. So I loved the shared memory about that.
Cool.
Actually, it was kind of funny because Melanie and Jennifer, you had your shared memory of a library. Stacy, when you started mentioning that you never went to your library growing up, that not your school library either, that instead you would buy books, that was totally my childhood. Our local library was only in Victor. I grew up in Teton Valley. So Victor was 40 minutes away from my house. I could never convince my parents to drive that far to go get a free book or return it. They just, no. And the school library, I didn't think you actually went to the school library for fun. That was where you went for classes. Why would you go for fun?
I know I never went in my school library. Well, I did it probably at the junior high. Up until the junior high, I might have, but at the high school, I don't even think we had one, but I'm sure we did. But I just go to the Boise library or the town square library, so it was all that mattered.
I was a library aide in high school. I loved I'm still in touch with my high school librarian, and when I worked at a public library, he used to call me up so I could wave his fines for him. It was the best.
Yeah, for my family, we bought all our books because we were so far away from a library, and my dad was just like, we'll never return them anyway. We might as well just buy them. And so whenever we went to the grocery store, Mom would go, hey, Maria, which one of these books should we get? And so, yeah, we totally would always buy some cheap paperback for $5. Got interested in all those different authors, read them all multiple times.
Yeah, and I grew up in Spokane, so it was a really big city, but not anywhere within walking distance to any of the libraries in the town, which, I mean, there's lots, but nothing within walking distance. And taking like public transit is a little bit, a little bit sketchy in Spokane, especially as like a young teenager. And honestly, it just never would have even dawned on me. Never would have even dawned on me to go to the library. Like that would have not even been on my radar. I didn't even go. I got a job as a in college at our university library, and then that was probably like the first time I'd actually like walked into a library, and I was like, oh, I can do this. I can check books in and out, no problem. Yeah, so it's kind of comical that this is where I ended up in the long run, because it's definitely not where I began. So
Yeah, so I grew up in Germany. My libraries weren't free. You had to pay like $5 a month to be able to go, which for was a lot of money anyway. But I was a bookworm, so it's like I actually started reading. There's a German author named Karl May, who every German has read. He wrote like mostly westerns, but I mean there's still like every summer there's arenas that just perform Kalamai plays, these Western with this noble Apache Indian, so, but through reading him, and he'd never been to the US, actually, these were like written in the late 1800s, and like he wrote all these Westerns without ever having been to the US and having no clue of it. Everybody was old something. There was like old Shatterhand and old Firehand and old Shorehand, and I was like, why do they all have the first name Old? Because I hadn't learned English by that point anyway. So anyway, but I became interested in Native Americans, and from that I became interested in the U.S. and interested in becoming an exchange student, and here I am. Ta-da! So blame Karl May.
I love that. So
That is cool.
when we talk about the teenage years in the in-person class, it can get a little intense because some people have unpleasant memories. So thank you for sharing your pleasant memories of your growing up experiences. But the reason that we do this type of exercise is that so that you can kind of remember what it's like to be that age. And when you think about the reasons why you didn't go to the library, transportation issues, convenience, just out of sight, out of mind, those are the same things that teens in your communities are also experiencing. So we do that reflection exercise, not just because we love hearing about how all you grew up, but we love hearing about how you grew up, but because it really helps you ground your thinking and really empathize with the kids who you want to serve. So you can start thinking about, well, what are the barriers to transportation to our library? They're in high school right across the street. Why aren't they just walking over? Like, what's the deal? It's not out of sight, out of mind either. Your library's right there. So I'm not sure about that one, Stacey. You're gonna have to work on it.
I think that we, our teen area in our teen area in our library is also, it's just like, it's like a tiny U-shaped space.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle of the U is like some patron computers. And so I think part of it is that there's nowhere to go when you come here except maybe to grab a book, but then it's also really awkward to grab a book because you also have to walk around all these like people using their computers,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's it makes you feel awkward maybe as a teenager to be like, oh, these people know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then our programming space is in our story time room, and I don't know, maybe teens don't like to sit on my story time rug and like I don't know, and be surrounded with like all of my like play toys in order to do their program. I don't know. Yeah, who knows? I don't think we're I'm working on being cool, but not quite there yet. So.
I mean, it's so funny. I've seen a lot of different teen spaces around the state and at other libraries, and I feel like inevitably the teens congregate wherever they can charge their phones.
Oh yeah, then they're not going to come in here because we're like an old Carnegie library with like 2 outlets.
Right.
So, get one of those charging stations. That has helped us so much.
Tell them that they can only charge if they'll like interact with you.
Well, they have to stay next to their phone. They can't be without it. So if they charge their phone there, they have to stay there.
Right.
We've started for some of our like tween program, which ended up mostly getting like little kids, but for a while we kind of got their, you know, anyways, we would turn the computers off because we'd be like, oh, the computers are down, I guess you're gonna have to come and hang out with us. Like, it's just a 20-minute window, you can get back on in 20 minutes.
When I was in a public library, inevitably, if we had some sort of computer snafu, the internet went out, whatever, the kids who were in the library playing the computers would just like zombies just sort of roam around, and then we'd be like, you want to do a program with us? Or if we had some sort of food.
Yes,
Yeah, food is big.
it is. All right, so some of you have talked about how you don't have the teens in your library. Well, think about the teens in your life. Going along with what Jennifer was saying about how this reflection also helps us think about the teens that we interact with and how, what would be some of the points that would block them from being able to come in. What are some of the connected learning pieces that they would reference? So if they would do a video just like you did, what would be their main topic? And who would be the people that they would reference? This can be your own children. This can be nieces and nephews, similar to my niece is the one I thought about the most. This can be the teens you see in the library. Who would be the people that they would reference as connecting them to different experiences?
I'd say out here in our area, the favorite teacher is the FFA director, but he also teaches all the ag classes. And he's got a buffalo ranch, which he talks about. He intrigues all the kids. With just rural livestock, just things about him. So I would say he impacts them a lot. I'm hoping I do, but I'm the last of my 3 teenagers, and we are starting to get a few in there, but they were already the readers. So I'm trying to get my son, who is 14 and a half, to encourage his friends to come in. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to be my goal on working when I get this thing bigger, the library bigger, and we can have some activities for him and his buddies to lead them. So we shall see. But I'd say a couple of teachers really stand out, and that's who they would talk about the most out here.
Awesome. I wonder if they would do anything with the library, if they, like, I know once we had a sheep shearing kind of thing at our library. Mm-hmm. Or like they showcased, like Travis brought in a bunch of sheep. One of my coworkers brought in a bunch of sheep, and they actually showed shearing, and then they showed how they dye wool.
Oh yeah, that could be an idea. And I could probably get like some of the 4-H leaders as well as the FFA advisor to kind of work it together. So yeah, something down the road. Yeah.
You can showcase some of their projects for the community. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something fun.
I like it.
It's funny because as you guys keep talking about how you're thinking about changing your setup for teens, what keeps popping up in my head is when I had a teen space at my old library, it was like this little teeny corner, but it had a big easy chair. Like someone had donated an easy chair and they said, this would be perfect for the teen area. The teens would like to sit. And so they donated this big easy chair. And it was awesome, except for the fact that the adults kept stealing it from the kids. So we had to tell them, once the teens show up, you need to leave. But yeah, so if you're designing a teen space, the big easy chair is nice, but be wary of the adults who keep stealing it.
So, yeah, I gotta put one in the adult room too, is what you're saying, Maria?
Yeah.
So yeah, because I'm gonna be looking for new furniture too, and something that's enticing, because right now our library has chairs that even Kevin, who has come out to our library a lot, Kevin has said, you're not bringing those new chairs to the new library, right? And I'm like, depends on my budget, Kevin. We shall see if I can find something free or donated or fundraised. We will see if we can get something new.
Ooh, you could see if there's an Eagle Scout in your area that wants to make a bench or something, or a table.
Oh yes, that's a good idea too. Yes.
Yeah, teens will sit on uncomfortable furniture as long as the space is theirs.
They will sit on the floor as long as it's next to an outlet and they can charge their phone.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm liking the charging station idea, so that just might have to be part of the new place. I could get them in there with that. So,
All right. Well, before we close out, I wanted to talk a little bit about what's coming up this week. This week, the lesson really gets into things to do and not do with teens, and I believe that some of the focus is on the work of the Chicago Learning Exchange. So they are it's a group in Chicago that focuses on teens, and they are really have sort of pioneered this connected learning theory. And so they have a really great document on what a connection really is, what a relationship really is, what opportunities really are. And so it's pretty, it's easy to digest, but it is like several pages long of information about opportunities, interests, and relationships. And then I'm going to email all of you a link to a Padlet. If you haven't worked with Padlet before, it's like an online digital tool that you can do a lot of different things with. You can make you can use it as like a virtual sticky note pad, so all of us could contribute sticky notes to a board. You can use it to do timelines. You can use it for a lot of things. What I'm going to do is send each of you an individual link, which is your Padlet, with a whole bunch of different ideas of things to do and not do with teens. And then you just use your link to move around the different ideas into a group of things you do and things not to do. And then once you've done that, the link doesn't change, but what you did on the link, it'll just stay there. And so you will post that in the discussion forum for next week. So, and that's just a knowledge check to make sure you kind of have an idea of when you're working with teens. These are good practices to do. These are good practices not to do. So expect an email from Padlet with your link either Friday afternoon or Monday morning. And that will be your like workspace for the week. Okay. And then other than that, we will all get together again in 2 weeks to sort of finish up the class and help you plan next steps. And congratulations on making it halfway through. Does anybody have any last questions or comments before we shut off the recording and go? Okay, well, thank you all for great participation today. Thanks for chatting about your lives, and we'll see you virtually in 2 weeks.
Yes, it's been so great to be able to converse this way. So thank you so much for the participation, and thank you so much for sharing all your comments. It's been great.